So, you may have heard the recent news about the environmental DNA results taken from Loch Ness and what it could potentially mean for the Loch Ness monster. A lot of news outlets reporting on this are jumping to the conclusion that Nessie, if it exists, is a gigantic eel, based on how a lot of eel DNA was found in the eDNA samples. Now, that's kind of jumping to conclusions, and I already said my piece on all of that in the previous video I did. However, I am making this video to emphasize a point that I made last time, which is that we need to go back to Loch Ness, and I'm more convinced than ever that we need to, because the more I've read about these tests and the results, the more I start to think that something's not right. And I don't mean that in a conspiracy theorist way. I just mean something about the results doesn't add up. Two somethings, actually. First of all, in my initial video, I asked the question of whether or not there was any DNA taken from Loch Ness that could not be categorized for whatever reason. Who knows why, I just was curious, because sometimes that does happen. You take DNA, and if something is wrong with it, either it doesn't match up with anything, or it's deteriorated, or something, it will be either listed as unknown, or it might just be discarded entirely while sequencing. It can happen. I didn't know at the time whether or not that was the case. Having done the research, it seems that 20% of the eDNA that was tested was categorized as unknown. 20%. Now that may not seem like a whole lot until you realize that 25% is a quarter. So nearly a quarter of the DNA samples could not be categorized as any known creature. Now why is that? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? It could mean anything. It could mean that there was DNA from known species that we just didn't get a good sample of for some reason, or it could mean there's a new species in the water that we can't identify because there's no DNA we know of to match up to it. Either way, 20% of the DNA is unknown. That would be odd enough without this next bit of information, which is that apparently the eDNA analysis turned up no DNA for seals or otters. That's weird because we know that seals and otters live in Loch Ness. That's not open for debate. It is indisputable that these creatures live in Loch Ness. Yet no DNA turned up for them at all. That should be impossible. When DNA is analyzed in this eDNA process, it should turn up everything that either is or ever has been in a location. Because things that even just pass by are always leaving DNA wherever they go. But no eDNA showed up for these creatures that we know are there? Well, that's the way it turned out, apparently. So even though we have all of these news articles jumping on the results and saying that either Nessie doesn't exist or if it does exist, it's a gigantic eel, they're leaving out or glossing over the fact that we still have two lingering questions. First of all, what does that 20% of uncategorized DNA belong to? And second, if the tests missed species that we know are in the lake, then what else could it have missed? A lot has been said about how there was no reptile DNA found and no exotic fish DNA, exotic for the region that is. Therefore, they can rule out plesiosaurs or sturgeons or sharks or any other such creatures. But the fact that they managed to miss two known species in the lake means that something went wrong somewhere. So at best, those results are questionable, and at worst, they're complete trash. So like I said the last time, we need to go back. We need to get more samples and run more tests. Science is not a one-and-done process. It's about repeated results. It's about consistency. The only way your theory becomes a hard fact is by repeated, consistent results and peer review. That is the scientific method. We've only done the one test from the one expedition, and the results are unusual. Let's be honest. There shouldn't have been any reason why two species we known to live there did not exist. And even if they did turn up, we still have that 20% that's unaccounted for. So what is that? Is it just known species that the DNA was deteriorated or damaged somehow? Was there a flaw in the process? Does it mean there's an unidentified species in there? I don't know. I don't have any of the answers. All I know is that the mystery has not been solved. And just to preempt any claims that I'm saying all of this because I didn't get the results I wanted, that's not true. I was more than willing to accept the eel hypothesis in my last video, believe me. And I still am, really. But the fact that we have uncategorized DNA and results that in a perfect world should not have been reached, that leaves me thinking that we cannot close the book on this. There's more work to be done, and I believe that now even more than when I said it the first time. We cannot close the book on the Loch Ness Monster. More tests need to be done. I worry that we might not see that for a while, though, because, I mean, let's be honest, most scientists don't take the Loch Ness Monster seriously. So I'm sure that most scientists, being only human, are going to look at these results and say, well, that's good enough for me, I never believed in that thing anyway, and not bother going back. But I'm encouraging the scientific community to not do that. We should go back. We should get more tests results. We should get more samples and run them through the process. And if we get the same results, well, that still raises questions, because if we get the same results that say no seals and otters that we know are there and 20% of unaccounted for DNA, that still leaves those questions unanswered, and we need to figure out what's going on. But if we get different results, well, that's where the mystery expands once again, isn't it? Either way, I need to stress the fact that this mystery is far from solved. We need to go back to Loch Ness. I will keep repeating that. We need to go back to Loch Ness. What will we find? I don't know. Maybe it'll be something like that. Maybe it'll be something like the eels. Maybe it'll be something no one could have predicted. Or maybe it will ultimately be nothing. I have no idea. I do not have the answers. I only know what questions need to be asked. And the questions I have asked are not small ones. So please spread this word around. Get it out there. Get it to people who will actually see it and take it seriously. The Loch Ness Monster mystery remains. I'm not questioning the eDNA results, mind you. I'm not questioning what they found. It's what they didn't find and what they couldn't categorize that interests me. And that's why we need to go back. I just hope that we will, and that we won't just leave this where it sits. Because what could possibly be less scientific than that? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.